Excellent. All right, so let's kick off with our presentation on what's happening in the world of Microsoft. So next slide, please. And again, yep. Okay, so we've finished with the Microsoft Ignite. So about a week or two ago, the big Microsoft IT Pro conference in the US in Orlando wrapped up. Lots and lots of news, which a lot of this will be based on. But a couple of things out of this is that if you're interested in going, certainly next year it'll be in Orlando again around the same sort of time. But I think the big takeaway is that Microsoft has made all of the sessions available as recordings up on YouTube, also in the tech community, and it's also made all the slides available. Now, there have been over 1,600, probably over 1,650 sessions, individual sessions that you can now watch and get all the slides for. Now, there is a PowerShell script available that you can use to pull down all that content and view it offline, including the videos, if you want to do that. So watch out for that if you're interested in getting that content, and that's the way to really start with the latest with what Microsoft's doing, because there's lots and lots of stuff happening, and we're only going to be able to cover a certain amount here. Now, the other thing to remember is the For Creators update of Windows 10 will be out or start rolling out from the 17th of October. So this is going to bring us some major improvements around OneDrive, also security. So watch out for that. Microsoft's rolling it out in waves, obviously, from the 17th. If you're an insider, you can get access to that now. And I certainly suggest you have a look at it, because there are some really great features in it that are certainly worthwhile when it comes to the upgrade. Microsoft is also talking about releasing a Surface Pro with basically built-in internet connectivity. It's talking about releasing that in the US in November. No word as to whether that will be coming to Australia. Apart from that, there aren't any major updates in the Microsoft pipeline, it would seem, for the Surface Pro line. But we'd probably expect the LTE version or equivalent to come out to Australia. So again, no news on a new Surface notebook, but again, some nice advances there, hopefully with the LTE, that will make it out to Australia. Now, the final bit of news for people here is that Microsoft is running their Business, Technology and Partner Summit over basically a week in November. You can sign up for those. So the business and the technology ones are free. The partner one, there is a cost to that unless you are a partner with a competency, gold or silver. And again, it's going to certainly be a big event. There's a lot of people flying out from the US. They will be obviously fresh from the Ignite sessions, so it's certainly a worthwhile investment of your time, obviously, to listen to that and to meet up with other IT pros in the industry. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about some Office 365 stuff. So I'm just going to reinforce what we spoke about last month, is that Outlook 2007 has been deprecated for connectivity to Exchange Server 2016. So that is going to affect people who have Office 365 and are trying to connect with Outlook 2007. Outlook 2010 is supported but requires additional patches. 2013 and 2016 obviously do work. So Microsoft is changing the protocols that connect and talk to Exchange. So please make sure that you and your customers have the latest, and really shouldn't be using Outlook 2007 to connect. Next slide, please. So probably the biggest news, which is not a surprise, we have mentioned, I think, this before, is that Microsoft is transitioning Skype for Business into Teams. So all the communications abilities within Skype for Business, so the ability to call others over VoIP or over landlines when that facility is enabled, will be now surfaced directly through Teams. Skype will be renamed to Teams. The desktop client for Skype will eventually go away and become integrated into the Teams app, which we've already seen. So there is a number of links there that you can look at to understand the journey from going from Skype for Business to Teams. One of the major motivations for this is that Skype for Business has been very good, but when you look at the application on the desktop, it probably is a little too complex for most average users to work with, to understand how to record meetings and to share content. Putting that inside the Teams application where there are already files, chat and whatnot, is going to make it a lot easier for users to start communicating using these sort of tools and to do video conferencing and whatnot. Now, Microsoft also announced that it is going to bring out Office 2019 packages to on-premises. So we're going to see an Office on the desktop 2019 and Office 2019 Skype server, Exchange server, and SharePoint server on-prem. So Microsoft is also committed to bringing out the latest version of Office, which it is going to start rolling out for preview, I think, in the second half of 2018. It will bring those out and make them available on the desktop. So it isn't going cloud only with this stuff or Office 365 subscription only. You'll still be able to buy those packages as you would normally. But the big news is that Skype is becoming Teams, and it's a good idea to start preparing and understanding what that's going to have, when ramifications it's going to have for users, and it's certainly pushing more and more people into Teams. So one of the big items in the keynote in the Ignite was the focus on Teams. So again, Teams is certainly something, if you haven't got into, do spend some time having a look at that and getting up to speed and understanding exactly what it is. Next slide, please. Okay, so lots and lots of announcements around SharePoint and OneDrive. So Microsoft has promised us a new SharePoint admin console. At the moment, it's, I suppose, old. It also has limitations in that we can't see sites that were created with groups. We can't see SharePoint sites that were created with teams. So Microsoft will begin to roll out a new admin portal that you can see here. That will give you visibility across all of those, will allow you to categorize them, be able to see which were created with groups, which were created with teams, get a better idea of what's been shared, what's been enabled, and again, better management. They're also rolling in the OneDrive admin console. So more of these services on the admin side that have been, I suppose, their own separate console are beginning to roll back into the main Office 365 console for you to be able to work with. So if you're working with SharePoint and you're doing administration, keep an eye out for the new admin portal that is rolling out to, obviously, first release tenants initially, and then rolling out to all other customers down the track. Next slide, please. Okay, so another announcement on the SharePoint side is Microsoft has now released its own migration tool. Now, the migration tool is currently in preview. It's a free download. Basically, it allows you to move files from an on-prem SharePoint environment or files and folders in a network share or local drive and move them up into SharePoint Online. Now, at the moment, it's a very rudimentary tool. It's very, very focused on moving files and folders. It's very easy to use, not a lot of options. Now, you certainly can pick individual sources to destinations. They also have a bulk ability to pick multiple directories, but that's typically done at the moment by uploading a CSV file with the destinations. So I have had a play with this. It's still probably very early, but if you are looking to do more SharePoint migrations and you basically want to move files, I would suggest you have a look at this tool. I'm sure it will update very regularly and very quickly. Okay, just wait for the screen to come back. So this will update very regularly, and I would suggest that it's something to have a look at, especially as we're moving more and more data basically over to SharePoint. So again, have a look at that link there and basically then download that tool and basically have a play with it. All right, so next slide, please. Okay, so another important announcement I think around SharePoint is this concept of hub sites. So the way that Microsoft's talking and best practice around SharePoint team sites and whatnot these days is to basically create a very flat structure. So each team now gets their team site, and again, you get one with a group. The problem is becoming is how do we pull all these together? The traditional intranet was a very deep structure with subsites within subsites and that sort of thing. That's a lot of that subsite structure has now moved out into individual site collections, and it's become a bit, how do we navigate, where's all this information? So Microsoft has announced it's going to make available very shortly an option here called hub sites. So you create a SharePoint hub site, and then what you do is you use that to tie together existing team site and communication sites. Now what that's going to do is it's going to firstly provide you a centralized navigation approach when it comes to information in SharePoint. So allow you to easily connect up all your structures so that users can go to the hub site and then navigate to other locations. The other flexibility it's going to give you is that as your structure changes over time, you're going to be able to take the hub site and reconfigure those links. So you won't have to go in and change the team sites, you can just change how they're linked to. Now the final advantage hub sites is going to give you, it's going to give you a consistent navigation and I suppose theme across your environment. So the hub site will again give you this consistent theme and navigation on your over the top of your team site and your communication site. So this is going to make it a lot more consistent for users, going to give you a central repository or a central navigation point that everybody can go to and then go to, whether it's an individual team site, whether it's a communication site, something that was created with Microsoft Teams or whatever. So again, really good functionality, and we're moving, like I said, to a world where the best practice with SharePoint is a very, very flat structure and typically team sites that are targeted at individual groups or functions. So admin, HR, finance have their own little team site, and this will now be linked back into a global intranet thanks to the hub site Microsoft is releasing. And again, if you want to read more about it, see some videos on it, have a look at the link here. Next slide, please. So I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the Ignite sessions was the maturity and the updates, and again, the positivity around OneDrive. So we've talked about the fact that basically OneDrive is a single location for users to share their information. Typically, many users are synchronizing information from their desktop to their OneDrive. One of the challenges with OneDrive has always been sharing files with external people who don't currently have an Office 365 or a Microsoft account. Now, the users could create a Microsoft account for free, but that put the onus back on that person to create the account, set it all up, put in a password. And if the person that you are sharing it with aren't particularly tech savvy, that can be a real challenge. So what Microsoft's done to alleviate that is now giving us an option where we can share a file from our OneDrive and soon also from SharePoint, that basically when you share a file, as you can see on the slide here, you can basically share that, and what will happen is the user who you're sharing it with will simply receive a PIN number that they use to access that file. So they'll click on the link, and then basically what will happen is they'll be prompted to enter the PIN code they have been sent in the email address. Once they enter that PIN code, they will have access to that file determined by the permissions that you've given them. Now you can also set up the fact that that PIN code can be required to automatically regenerate after 30 days. So if you have a sharing environment where you want to put out a PIN code, but you want this to be an ongoing process, then you can basically force the user to re-verify that it is this user with that PIN code. So it's going to make sharing, I think, from OneDrive and from SharePoint much easier. People won't have to go in and create a login and then log into the account and have all the issues we have seen with that. Now they'll basically just put in the PIN code that they've been sent via email, and that will give them access to the information. So again, this update is rolling out very quickly. My reading of what Microsoft has put out is that first release tenants will start seeing this around the 9th or 10th of October. So if you are using OneDrive to share files externally with people and you want to do that anonymously or without them logging in, certainly keep an eye out for this verification code process. But again, more information on the link, and you can actually see it in action at some of the presentations from Ignite. Next slide, thank you. So the big thing which we mentioned is that with Windows 10 Creators Update, we're going to get our OneDrive on demand. So what this means is that rather than synchronizing everything to our desktop or maybe doing selective sync, all the files initially will stay in OneDrive in the cloud. We will get a directory listing of all those files, so we'll be able to see them. And in the picture you can see here, the status will show you that when there's a little cloud icon, obviously the files are still in Office 365, and then you can download those and work on those temporarily, or you can force them to always be or always sync to your desktop. So you've got a couple of options here. Now what that's going to mean is that users can now set up their OneDrive, they can now sync all their files without downloading everything to their desktop. Then they'll be able to pull down what they need, and then what Microsoft will enable is the ability after, say, 30 days, 60 days, that if that file hasn't been worked on, it will then move back to the cloud. So it's going to, again, keep us much cleaner. It's going to prevent a lot of these synchronization errors. It's going to remove having massive amounts of data on smaller and smaller device drives. And it's hopefully also going to prevent us from getting, or customers from getting crypto locked and then sharing that or syncing that back up to OneDrive. Now, to get OneDrive files on demand, you basically need to have the Windows 10 Creators Update, which we mentioned is rolling out from the 17th of October. And if you want to get a preview of this, go and join the Windows Insider program for Windows 10, and you'll be able to have a look at this. So it's a really good feature, and this, I think, is going to be one of the tipping points that really is going to push OneDrive to be a major contender in this sort of area and overcome a lot of the issues that it had in previous times. Next slide. Okay, so another major update to OneDrive is now the ability to roll back multiple files in one hit. Now, this has been typically brought about because of the CryptoLocker issues. So a user has OneDrive files synced to their desktop, they have a copy of their whole OneDrive, they get infected with CryptoLocker, that then encrypts the files that are then synced back to OneDrive. All the files in OneDrive then are encrypted, and if they're shared with others, that ends up encrypting everybody else. Now, you've always been able to roll back previous versions within SharePoint and OneDrive, but you would have to do it individually, file by file by file in the web interface. There's also a way to do it in bulk using PowerShell, but that has been a little bit, obviously requires a little bit of technical knowledge to do that. Now, Microsoft has or will be enabling very shortly the ability for you to go into your OneDrive, select the restore option here, and basically select all the files that you want to restore and then pick a period of time. So at the top of the graphic there, you can see basically a timeline that will show you the number of files that have changed at that point in time. And then you'll be able to select that point, and then from the list below, select the files, and it will restore all those in bulk for you. So again, if you get crypto locked, you can just go back 2 days, select all the files in one hit, and then just restore them back over the top. So it's going to make it much easier to work with and recover files if we need to. Now, this Restore My OneDrive doesn't replace the recycle bin. The recycle bin is designed for users who purposely delete a file and then you want to recover it from there. The idea with Restore My OneDrive is that we have version control automatically enabled on OneDrive and SharePoint. So that means every time a file is updated, there is a new version created, and we're just creating, Microsoft's giving us now an interface to allow us to roll back all of these updates in one hit. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about some Azure news here. Again, lots and lots of good stuff coming out when it comes to Azure as well. Now, the first thing is that Azure has a new logo. Woohoo! So you'll see that, again, it sort of looks, one of the descriptions I've heard is it looks a bit like the Office logo that's been run over by a steamroller, but again, there hasn't officially been a logo, but now there is. So when you do see this new A logo over there, you'll know that they are referring to Azure. Next slide, please. Now, one of the big advantages with something like Azure is that it's all software deployable. So we basically have networking as software, we have virtual machines as software, we have infrastructure as software, and that has meant that we've been able to work with this using PowerShell. Now, Microsoft has built in the ability for you to go to a shell in the browser. Now, that shell used to only run Bash, so the Bash shell, but Microsoft has now enabled that shell via the browser to also run PowerShell. So you can now run your PowerShell commands out of your browser by going to the cloud, the new cloud PowerShell. But also the really good thing is if you put the Azure app on your device, so in this case iOS, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, there is now the ability to go to the cloud shell, and that will basically give you a command line that will run PowerShell on your iOS or on your Android device. So you can now basically run scripts, do anything you can do with PowerShell directly on your mobile device. And the great thing about the Cloud PowerShell is you don't have to install the modules and you don't have to log in because you've already logged into the browser. Microsoft knows that when you connect to the Cloud Shell here, it already knows who you're logged in as, and it will pass that information directly into the shell that it spins up, so you avoid all that. So getting in and out of the shell via the app and also the web browser is going to be so much quicker and so much easier to work with. So again, the big advantage of PowerShell is the ability to script things, to do automation, and to have repeatability. So if you do not have the Azure app on your device yet, go and download it, put it on there, no cost. Have a look at the Cloud PowerShell. Also in your browser, when you log into the Azure portal, you'll also find the ability to go out and run this as a PowerShell command directly in the browser, which is really cool. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the other really big announcements, I think, especially in the SMB space, is going to be the new Azure File Sync service. Now, this is basically a new service. What it allows you to do is basically create an Azure SMB file share, so like a network share, but in Azure, then to install an agent on file servers or on any device, but at the moment it's file servers, and then you target a folder or a network share, and Azure will then synchronize that information directly up into the Azure file share, and then you can connect other machines to that and also share that information. So this has been an option that's been provided by many third-party people, and now Azure's doing it directly as well. Now, it's early days for the product. As you see, it's currently in preview, so it's worthwhile having a look. I expect this product to mature very quickly. I think there'll be a lot of demand for it. Now, some of the advantages of looking at the Azure File Sync product is the fact that, for example, it's got the ability to integrate directly with Azure Backup. So what that means is that the information on your file server is synchronized to a location in Azure in the cloud, so it's backed up, it's protected there, and then you can target that with Azure Backup and actually back up the files that are already in Azure into another location for redundancy. So this is extremely powerful, and I think this is the big advantage of not only having a sync service in Azure, but having all the other abilities that are in there. So you've got the backup, you've got the connection to Azure AD, you've got the ability to control writes, and also importantly, you're going to have something like the Azure Security Center sitting over the top of this, watching for events that may be, causing security issues, or people shouldn't be logging in and getting all this sort of information. So again, Azure File Sync, new file service, but the important thing here, and I think why this is going to be so important, is that this is going to leverage off so many other services Azure's using, and again, give you a way to take those file shares and basically back them up and share them between multiple servers. Now, this service isn't replacing something like OneDrive or SharePoint. It's basically going to serve the function of all those people who have file shares that they currently don't want to move to SharePoint, or they're not ready to, or they're not ready to embrace SharePoint. This will give them the ability to synchronize between servers for redundancy and also back up their information quickly and easily into something like Azure. So again, it's in preview, but certainly go and have a play with it. I think it's going to be a very big and fast improving service. Next, please. Now, if you have bucket loads and bucket loads of data, which some people do have, Microsoft has announced a Azure box. So the Azure Data Box, as you see, what they'll do is they'll ship you the data box out. Think of it as a big USB disk. You copy all your information up there, ship it back to Microsoft, and then they'll put it in the data center and you can upload it from there. So Microsoft already has a Drive shipping service, and again, the idea here with the data box is this is for really large terabyte upon terabytes of data to move up into the cloud. So again, a nice little service if you do have customers who maybe have huge amount of CAD files, video files, and they can make advantage of them in Azure, but the problem's always getting them up there on the bandwidth. So this way you can get a nice big disk from Microsoft, copy your data up there, ship the disk back, they'll connect it up and allow you to move that data. So again, have a look at that as an option if you do have customers who have especially large amounts of data, even archived data. You can just basically copy it and shift it manually, in this case, thanks to this new Microsoft Azure Data Box service. Next, please. And again, one of the interesting announcements was that SQL is now running on Linux. So SQL Server 2017 is available for Windows and now also for Linux. So the code base is exactly the same. Microsoft has a like emulation technology in between, but the SQL 2017 Windows is exactly the same code base as what's running on Linux. Now, if you have customers who use things like Oracle or Ingress or those sort of databases that are running on Linux, maybe something to consider. The excitement around this product is especially for people who are using Oracle and finding that to be an expensive option. They can now consider the SQL option from Microsoft. Again, you get the advantage if you're looking to do that in Azure. You've got pre-configured machines you can just spin up and they will have all the configuration and the optimization for you as well. But again, I think this is a really big step forward for people who are very SQL dependent and who really want to see that running on something like Linux. That is now available from Microsoft, and as always, there is a equivalent version for Windows as well. Next slide, please. Okay, if you haven't heard, most partners already get access to Azure themselves through their partner account. But if you want, Microsoft is making an Azure free account. So if you're not currently having access to Azure, you can sign up for this at no cost. You'll get $260 worth of credits, which you can use for 30 days. You can keep using the free products, and then you can obviously convert that and pay for it as well down the track if you want. So there are some other benefits for that. If you're interested in investigating Azure, or maybe people in your team, your techs or whatever, are also looking to play with Azure, get some idea of it, this may be a very good place for them to start. So sign them up for a free Azure account, $260 worth of credits, and they can really get some stuff done in there. Now, my advice to you is if you do sign up your techs or whatever to this, make sure that you give them a project for them to work on so that they can make advantage of it immediately. So again, probably a good idea to sit around and to, okay, what would we like to do in Azure, or what would we like to see? Maybe we want to run up a complete network with a domain controller synchronized to a demo Office 365. Let's do that sort of task in our Azure free account. But again, anybody can sign up to this and you'll get $260 worth of credits and a number of other free options to help you along your Azure learning path. Next slide, please. We've also got some new VM sizes, more cost effective. I would suggest that you keep an eye on all these new VM sizes that are coming out. So in my experience, I've been working with standalone VMs for a while now to do things like standalone servers or standalone domain controllers for testing purposes. What I've actually found now is that there is better value to be obtained if you use nested virtualization. So what we can do is get one machine which is a bit larger with a bit more memory, a bit disk space. We can spin that up and then we can run Hyper-V inside that virtual machine. So then we can have virtual machines within virtual machines there. So instead of having a network with 5 or 6 machines, which are each costing me and I have to spin them up and spin them down, now I've got a single virtual machine with nested Hyper-V inside, and it's just costing me for the time that I'm running that one major virtual machine. So again, have a look at all these machines that are coming out. The prices are coming down dramatically. They're quite cost competitive for you to have a look at, I think, and it gives you more options when you've got things like nested virtualization. You may not need to have one server for every task. Maybe you can just roll it all into one massive Hyper-V host. Next, please. Now, to match the AWS service is Microsoft has announced reserved instances. So the idea with this is you can say, look, I'm going to want a virtual machine of this size for a period of 1, 3 years or whatever. And by making a commitment to that machine over an extended period of time, rather than just looking at it a consumption-based ad hoc model, you can save, I think the figure I saw was around 80% of the cost. Now, again, there's a link there to have a look at, but the idea here is again, if you are willing to commit to a period of time to use a virtual machine ongoing, then Microsoft's going to give you significant discounts when it comes to that machine, because obviously they can reserve that in the data center. It doesn't have to be spun up on demand or made on demand. So again, if you're looking for long-term usage, or customers are looking for long-term usage of virtual machines, have a look at reserved instances. Next slide, please. And to finish off is that if you look in your VMs, you'll now see that under the operations, we now have a number of additional options. We have disaster recovery, update management, inventory, and change tracking. Now, for example, inventory will show you the RAM, the CPUs, the disks, the software installed. The change tracking will show you registry changes, logins, all that sort of stuff. Update management will allow you to apply patches to your virtual machines automatically and in maintenance windows and all sorts of things like that. And with the right configuration, you can also extend this same sort of functionality back to the on-prem as well. So again, Microsoft is responding to the need to manage virtual machines by rolling these sort of features into every virtual machine that you spin up. Some of these are extremely powerful and extremely amazing in the detail they can go into. So all the information that's collected, for example, in the update management is fed then into the Azure Security Center so that you can look at all your machines overall, or you can drill into each machine and just look at that update management. So if you've got virtual machines running, go in, have a look at some of these new features under the operations tab.